Okay, let's just dive right into this explainer and impartially unpack what is frankly an astonishing, hyper-pragmatic guide to surviving what the author calls a rigged financial system. The source material we're digging into today is a fascinating text titled How to Never Go Broke or Be Homeless. It's written under the pen name Gorilla Joe, and it presents itself as this unapologetic, totally street-smart manual for people who are feeling completely crushed by modern economic pressures. It is packed full of highly unconventional and sometimes legally gray tactics, all designed for one single purpose: raw, immediate financial survival.
So, our agenda for today covers 5 key areas. First, we'll look at adopting a proactive survival mindset. Second, managing transportation and gas. Third, raising emergency cash quickly. Fourth, unconventional housing strategies. And finally, operating under new identities. Let's get to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the proactive survival mindset.
You know, the foundation of this entire Street Smart Guide relies on a massive shift in how you view your place in the modern financial world. Before the author offers even a single financial tip, he argues that you literally have to completely rewire your thinking. The very first step, rejecting the idea that you're just some helpless victim. The author believes that everyday people have been unfairly deprived of wealth by greedy corporations and policies. So to survive, the text argues you have to break out of this so-called mediocrity cage using aggressive, Houdini-like cleverness to basically beat the system at its own game.
And the source draws a really stark comparison to anchor this whole philosophy. It's all about shifting from a passive victim mentality, someone who just accepts debt and is totally controlled by fear, over to a proactive guerrilla survival approach. The author uses this guerrilla persona to represent someone who is aggressive, street smart, and totally capable of walking completely untouched through what he calls a jungle of deceit. This mindset right here, it's the engine that makes absolutely all the following tactics possible.
Moving right along to Section 2, managing transportation and gas.
Now, what's really interesting about this section is how it tackles our most immediate everyday emergency, keeping our vehicles running. Because, let's be real, if you can't commute, you can't survive. The guide acknowledges a pretty brutal reality for a lot of folks right now, which is that soaring gas prices can actually force people to cut their food budgets just to afford the drive to work. And when you're in a spot like that, standard budgeting advice is pretty much useless. The author insists that radical, street-smart action is required to keep your tank full without spending a single dime.
So, the absolutely crucial point here is bypassing cash entirely. The source outlines a detailed list of bartering strategies for essential goods. Aside from your standard carpooling, the author suggests bartering private label rights, or PLR, digital products. These are things like ebooks or articles you can legally copy and trade. He also details trading digital services, then creating videos or building websites worth up to $1,500. You trade these directly with individuals or mechanics in exchange for gas money or auto parts. It's really all about leveraging these invisible digital assets when your physical wallet is totally empty.
But what happens if your car breaks down completely? To maintain these essential transportation assets, the guide details how to secure mechanical repair loans for up to $5,000 with zero down. And get this, even if you have zero credit. The source points to specific instant approval financiers. Now sure, the stated interest rates on these are incredibly high, but the guide highlights a highly specific strategic loophole. If you pay the balance off in 90 days, you often get a full interest rebate. So if executed perfectly, it effectively becomes a free emergency bridge loan. Crazy, right?
Okay, on to Section 3, raising emergency cash quickly.
Let's move to the next phase of the survival timeline and see how this builds into covering short-term cash flow gaps when your savings are, well, essentially zero. If you get hit with an unexpected bill, traditional routes like pawn shops or payday loans might already be closed to you. To combat this, the author presents some highly unconventional, definitely legally gray methods for raising between $500 and $1,500 in emergency cash within just 72 hours.
One of the most extreme tactics in the book involves what we'll call the rental loophole. This controversial step-by-step tactic uses collected rental deposits as basically a short-term, interest-free loan. The guide suggests, Step 1, advertise a rental room. Step 2, legally collect the deposit 45 to 60 days before the move-in date. Step 3, use that cash to resolve your immediate personal emergency. And Step 4, simply change your mind about renting it out and return the deposit with a sincere apology. Now, the author does caution to pick someone who won't be financially harmed by the delay, but man, it illustrates exactly how the source suggests bending contract norms for raw survival.
Section 4. Unconventional housing strategies. Moving up the hierarchy of needs, if you're facing eviction, the author argues that standard advice just won't cut it. The guide lists several practical, though sometimes extreme, tactics for putting a roof over your head without a single dime in your pocket. These range from the highly risky move of literally just moving into an abandoned property to acquiring depreciated RVs for pennies. It also suggests some highly practical social solutions like becoming a long-term house sitter or exchanging yard work and companionship for room and board with lonely elderly homeowners.
The text even maps out a really complex subleasing strategy. So first, you find an abandoned, dilapidated home on the tax rolls. Next, you negotiate with the owner to get power of attorney to manage repairs in exchange for free rent. But here's the street-smart twist. You don't actually do the work yourself. Instead, you act as a middleman. You advertise 6 to 12 months of free rent to new subtenants who promise to do the fixing. You collect their security deposits, and if they fail to do the repairs, you legally evict them, keep the deposits, and just start the process all over again.
Now, this brings us to a really critical junction in the explainer, because everything we've discussed so far requires at least some level of participation in the system. But what happens when your financial history is a total dead end? What do you do if you have bankruptcies or a criminal record completely blocking you from starting a business or getting a loan?
This leads us to Section 5, Operating Under New Identities.
Finally, the guide details its absolute most extreme structural maneuver. This is specifically for those who have been entirely locked out of the traditional financial system due to lengthy bankruptcies or criminal records. The text explains a method for legally bypassing your own destroyed credit to secure startup capital and loans. And just to be abundantly clear up front, the source is explicitly not advocating for identity theft. Instead, the author advises finding a willing partner, a trusted friend or family member with a squeaky clean background. With their explicit, fully informed permission, you essentially operate your new business under their clean identity and bank account. They basically act as the public face to acquire the credit cards and startup loans that you would otherwise be denied. This structural workaround allows you to get right back in the game and generate income from behind the scenes.
So after reviewing all these astonishing tactics impartially, it really makes you think, doesn't it? We've looked at bending contracts, exploiting digital bartering, and utilizing the identities of others. It leaves us asking a very real question. In a system the author describes as a rigged jungle, when the chips are totally down and you're facing the very real threat of going broke, what unconventional steps would you take to secure your own financial survival? Keep that in mind, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.